And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as today your Indiana Hoosiers defeat Portland State 85-74 in a game that certainly featured a lot of offense for the Indiana Hoosiers, but not a lot of defense. And, obviously, look, getting a victory is good. Getting a victory by double digits is also good. But, as Coach and I were talking about, before we went live, a lot to really pick apart in this game for Indiana, which featured, I think, a really poor defensive performance. And, you think back to what Archie Miller said in the postgame, his postgame comments after the Portland State game, or after the Western Illinois game, and he was not happy with the defense, even though statistically it looked like an okay performance. And today, we might have seen some of the things that he was upset about. Indiana gives up 1.104 points per possession to Portland State, a team that's ranked, down in the 270s, somewhere around there. So, context, very important in these early season games. And this just wasn't a very good defensive performance by the Hoosiers, a game where they really just didn't show a killer instinct today. Again, they scored enough points to win, but when they had opportunities to put Portland State away, to really put some distance between them, they just weren't quite ready to make those plays, and Portland State was able to hang around and make this more of a game than it really should have been. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm your host today, here with Coach Brian Tonsoni, and we're going to break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. And let's start this edition of the Assembly Call the way that we start every one, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And, ironically, for a game where the overall defense wasn't good at all, the banner moment is going to be a defensive moment. In the second half, it was 59-53. You'll recall Boo Boo Woods had just gone on a tear. He made 3 or 4 three-pointers in a row. It hit, a little mid-range jumper, and he was really cooking. Al Durham was guarding him, Armand Franklin was guarding him, and no one was really able to stop him. And I put, a big note in caps in, my notes that I take during the game, who is going to get pissed off and remind Woods that he is playing in Assembly Hall. And the guy to do it, as we saw, a lot of times last year, was Rob Phinisee, who, had an uneven day offensively, as we're going to talk about, but really came through in that big stretch in the second half, from about the 10.5-minute mark in the second half to about the 6.5-minute mark, when the game was really kind of back in the balance because of what Woods was doing. Rob Phinisee got it going defensively. And at that particular moment, when it was 59-53, that's where Rob had switched on to Woods. And you'll remember the play over on the sidelines where Rob was really aggressive. I think Woods, either dribbled it or passed it out of bounds. They kind of started jawing back and forth. The technical foul happened. And it kind of felt to me like Rob saying, hey, I'm here. I'm going to get in your grill and play some defense. And that's what he did. Woods did not score for the next 4 minutes with Rob guarding him. He was all over him, didn't let him, get those three-pointers, did not let him just drive to the basket, bodied him up, and really just made life difficult on him. And Indiana would then extend the lead all the way out to 70-57. And in fact, on the bucket that they got to 70 on, it was a nice pass from Rob to Trace Jackson Davis for the dunk. And then they kind of nursed that edge for the rest of the game. So it wasn't a great performance from Rob, again, as we'll talk about, but in that really key stretch, when no one else was really, stepping up to play defense and lock Portland State down, Rob Phinisee did it, and I thought that really turned the game in the second half. So hat tip to Rob Phinisee for that defense and for slowing down Woods, who, hat tip also to him, who really came in that second half, competed hard, and, almost brought his team back before Rob decided to step up and shut him down. All right, our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, which was founded by an IU grad and remains based in Indianapolis. And if you haven't been paying attention to what's been going on over at Home Field Apparel, you really need to go to their website, homefieldapparel.com, as soon as you can to check it out. They've got the incredibly comfortable Bison logo hoodie, which is made out of their soft tri-blend material. I was wearing that hoodie this morning at the park with my daughter, and I kid you not, 2 people commented on it, and that's in Dallas, how they liked the logo. Another guy was at the farmer's market and told me how much he liked it. An interesting story, he was one of the graphic designers for Cook Hall. This is like what he does is he goes around and helps design like these athletic facilities for college teams, and he had pictures on his phone of Cook Hall and some of the work that he had done for it. So kind of a fun, interesting story. But hey, that's what happens when you wear the Bison logo hoodie out. So get yours. In addition to that, they've got the IU Basketball Champions t-shirt, the vintage sneakers design, and, of course, the 9 Windiana shirt, which the football Hoosiers are 2 wins away from making one of the greatest called shots in sports apparel history. But they've got a ton of great items there. All of them are comfortable at homefieldapparel.com. And because you're a member of the Assembly Call audience, you get a massive discount when you order at homefieldapparel.com. Go to homefieldapparel.com, use the promo code Assembly20, that's Assembly20, and you will get 20% off anytime for your entire order. Again, go to homefieldapparel.com, use the promo code Assembly20 for 20% off your entire order. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. And today, that is Coach Brian Tonsoni. Coach, your opening thoughts on this underwhelming Indiana victory.
Well, underwhelming to say the least. Any win is a good win, and you need to, Archie said it in the last game, it's hard to win in college basketball, and that is true. Today's game was not an outstanding game offensively. It was not an outstanding game defensively. And as a coach, you're going to go back and watch film and share that with the team. But there were some bright spots, and we'll talk about the players that really did well today. Race Thompson was one. I thought Trace Jackson Davis had a nice game. And I think Justin Smith, again, has now shown 3 or 4 games of consistent effort and play. And maybe not perfect. But so you always want to find the negative, and we're going to talk a lot about that, but then you always got to go back and find the positive. And this is a game, they threw in a bank 3 and they threw in a 3 at the very end of the game. You take those away, and it's a 17-point difference in a game that you were favored by 20, and a young man, the Woods kid, got really hot. And so you're going to have that in the game of basketball. So, Sagarin and all of those had us around a 20-point game, and it ended up 11. And so I don't think when everyone sits back and relax, it's not too far off. And, you learn from it and you move forward.
So, Coach, let's talk about the defense, because I think you and I both agree, offensively there were some bright spots. I think from a rebounding perspective there were some bright spots, and we will get to those. But let's talk about why the defense was not good today. And I think it really starts with the guards. And, again, I thought Rob played really good defense for that one stretch. But outside of that, the pack line, one of the number one principles of the defense is don't allow dribble penetration. Keep guys out of the lane. And part of that obviously is the athletic ability that the guards bring to the table. Part of it is also just competing and saying, you know what, I'm going to beat you to this spot and you're not getting in the lane on me today. And I didn't think Al really had that. I don't really think Armand had that for most of the day. And, you look at it, and Woods finishes with 27 points. Hauser finishes with 21 points. I mean, this team's going to face a lot of better guards than those two. And those two played really well, don't get me wrong. But we're going to face a lot better guards than those guys, and that perimeter defense has to be better. And so, that to me is really where it starts. And, Armand as a freshman, as you and I talked about beforehand, he kind of played like a freshman today for the first time, and that's going to happen. But I was disappointed in kind of the tone that Al set defensively, because I just didn't think he was as locked in as he has been, and he's frankly just got to be better than that on the defensive end of the court.
Yeah, I think all 3 guards were very weak for most of the game until Rob Phinisee decided to shut it down at the time that you mentioned, and just basically won the basketball game with his defense. This team needs to play 40 minutes of defense, and it starts with the guards. And the terminology, guard your yard. In the game of college basketball, you're going to get beat. It's a downhill game, and the guards practice that from when they're in the middle school. And anyone at Division I can get downhill. You just want to make it a lot more difficult than what was done today. It was too downhill, too easy, too quick without changing. And the difference in the last 7 minutes when the game was extended out of reach was they didn't have direct drives. They got beat a couple times, but it was better at the point of attack. And that's that combination of ball pressure in the Gannon game in the first half in game 1 against Western Illinois. So that's just a work in progress. But our guards have to guard, because if we're going to play big, we're already going to be in a difficult situation on the ball at the 3 with Justin and Jerome until they get up to speed guarding that 3. And even some stretch 4s can put the ball on the ground if you're going to have Trace Jackson Davis and Race out there. So, it's a work in progress. Giving up 74 points, regardless of the 2 threes that I talked about. If you just gave up 68 against Portland State, that's not ideal. But again, we all got to take a step back. Do you want ideal defense in game 2 Or do you want ideal, in game 8, 9, 10, and when the Big Ten comes, there's a level of patience in a program. It's a journey, not it takes some time in a lot of aspects. And we're sitting here in a game that's 11-point loss and we're disappointed, or 11-point win and we're disappointed. And that's a good sign of maybe that the program is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I'd like to see the baseline for the defense be a little bit better, even if it's game 2. You think back to last year, actually, that Montana State game that Indiana won 80-35. It was actually one of their best defensive performances of the season. I mean, they shut them down. And obviously, that maybe didn't portend what was going to happen for the rest of the season, but it does, get back to, we talked about this on the Thursday radio show, Archie Miller basically saying we're not a very good defensive team right now. And we were like, okay, is that a little bit of coach speak? No, I think he's right based on what we saw today. I think you also saw a little bit today the impact of Devontae Green being out. I mean, we only have 3 guards. As you mentioned, some of the other guys that are trying to guard on the perimeter, Justin Smith, Jerome Hunter, some of the times we got beat, it was those guys. And they can get better, but also they're in a position where, they probably are going to get beat a few times if they're out there trying to guard quicker guys on the perimeter. Having a Devontae Green, who is a pretty good defender when he's fully locked in, to rotate with those other 3 guards is going to help. So I think that's also part of it. But also part of it is I just got the feeling throughout this game, and it goes back to what I talked about off the top with not having a killer instinct, where I felt like Indiana came to play. Like they played pretty hard. Like they ran the court, they got out in transition, they did some of those things, but they didn't really come to compete. Like they didn't dig in and give that extra grit that you need to keep that guy out of the lane or to challenge that shot. Like there's kind of that little extra. They didn't quite have it. Ryan might blame it on the early start time. Whatever you want to say, they just didn't quite have it. And that to me was probably the more disappointing thing because, we talked about what do you look for in these early games? It's habits. And you don't want to get into the habit of doing that, but then saying, oh, but we can score points and it's okay. So I have to imagine that's what the coaches are going to, beat into them. This was a performance that would get you beat in a lot of games on your schedule. You were just lucky enough to be playing one of the worst teams, so you got away with it. And so if we sound a little overly negative after a victory, that to me is why. Indiana came to play, but didn't necessarily come to compete today, and that's why I was disappointed.
And this isn't something that I would do in the locker room as a coach, but on the show too, we look at the Ken Palm rating of Portland State. We look at the conference that they're coming from, and we automatically think it's supposed to be a 25-30. Well, they were in the gym improving as well. Kudos to their guards for hitting some big shots and shots right in the face. The one of the threes was very well guarded, hand contested, and when a Division I guard starts feeling it, there's not a lot you can do as a coach and a player to get that stopped. It's going to take a series of plays to get him out of his rhythm or to get someone else to take some shots to get him to be cooled off. And Portland State, I was surprised to hear they were over 500 last year. So they improved too. And we look at it from the Indiana side, not trying to make excuses. This was not a game that I enjoyed watching either, but sometimes the other team comes to play and plays at their peak. And I think that has to be figured in a little bit before we go with where.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the first half because I thought there was a really important sequence in the first half as we look for positives. Indiana was nursing kind of a 4 or 5 point lead there for a little while. And there was a nice spurt at the end of the first half that included Jerome Hunter knocking in a 3-pointer. Trace Jackson Davis had a block shot. It ended up leading to a layup for Armand Franklin. And for a while, it was kind of the leader in the clubhouse for the banner moment until the second half got a little crazy and Rob had to step up for the defense. But I thought that was a great sequence for our young guys. Because while Armand did not have his best game today, of all the performances we've seen from him, this was the shakiest that he's been. I thought this might have been the best that Jerome and Trace have played. Jerome was able to knock down a couple of 3-pointers, had a really nice offensive rebound tip in the second half where he kind of showed his instincts and his awareness. Like we've seen the inside from him. We finally saw the outside. That was great to see. And Trace, picked up a double-double, led Indiana in plus-minus. He had 13 points, 10 rebounds, had a couple of block shots. I thought he did compete really well for the most part, ran the floor, played hard. So I was really impressed with what we saw from him, and just that stretch in the first half from those freshmen. Nice to see what those young guys are bringing, and we'll talk about Race Thompson more because he's another guy who isn't a freshman, but it kind of feels like one, and he also stepped up and really competed on the glass, and so it was nice to see from those young guys, that they for the most part brought it.
Yeah, and we need to look too. This team is known for its pressure, and there were 10 turnovers totally, and one was a post up on Justin Smith, and so an offensive foul, and so those are some good things as well. But yeah, you got to shake the rust off in these early season, and I think this team, if you're looking at it, there's going to be a lot of these games where you scratch your head and wonder why this guy did this and this guy did this, because otherwise you wouldn't schedule 7 games in a row where you're building up to the tough December. I think Archie really knew that he was going to have to bring this team along slowly. And again, that's where I feel comfortable, not happy, but comfortable right now with the double-digit win that never really was. And when we got down to 5, it felt a little tight, but they took care of business. And and you're without Green. And I think your comment about missing Green was evident just from a rotation basis. Plus, to beat a team with pressure, you need someone to blow by. And Justin did that a few times. Rob did that a few times against the set half-court pressure. But Devontae could shoot over it, just pull up and shoot over it. He was our boo-boo that wasn't on the bench. Sometimes when you're stagnant, you just need the ball to go in by somebody, and we don't have that yet. I wrote down we had to drive against pressure in the first half, and we were just passing it along the perimeter, and we were allowing that pressure to make it tough on the offense. And once the attack started happening on offense, so those are teaching points. And again, you get in there and you teach and you get better, and you come out next Tuesday and hopefully play a more complete game.
Yeah, and Race Thompson also is a guy who came in. He had 6 rebounds in the first half in 8 minutes. He, in 16 minutes, he almost got a double-double. He had 10 points and 9 boards. And as I was watching him in the first half, and this is a comparison I'm obviously hesitant to make, but I was reminded a little bit when he rebounds of Alan Henderson. Now, Alan Henderson is maybe the best rebounder in the history of the school. So here's what I mean by that: the timing, the way he attacks aggressively, the way that he times his leap to go up and get the ball at the height of its rebound, and the way that he keeps the ball up after he rebounds and is in a position to score or do something with it. He just has really good rebounding technique. That's what reminds me of Allen. Obviously, Allen did 8,000 other things. He was such a complete player, such a great player. But just that specific thing, and you saw it. I mean, look, Race Thompson early in the season, and we saw it a little bit last year, like in the Wisconsin game, he's showing that he is going to be a valuable guy off the bench. Because, he still struggles defensively, guarding, guys on the move and doing some of those things, but you are not going to out-tough him, and you're really going to have to get in good position to out-rebound him. And that is a valuable thing to have off the bench, and I don't think he's going to start, and there may be some games that are tougher matchups for him, but I think he's going to be the kind of guy that it's going to be hard for Archie to keep him off the court late in a close game because he defends, he rebounds, and he gets loose balls. And he makes free throws. He was 4 of 4 from the line. So he's kind of putting himself in a position where he's making it hard to keep him off the court. And when you're a reserve guy, that's what you want to do. Make that decision hard for the coach.
Yeah, and you stole my line on the free throws. But 10 points, 9 rebounds, 4 of 4 in 16 minutes. The thing, too, is when he does get beat, he walls up really nice, just sticks his hands up and makes the shot as tough as it can be. And I like that because, you get a post player with some agility and he catches just at the elbow or something and he gets by you, but he recovers and he stays with the play. And you mentioned competing. I thought he competed extremely well in the first 2 games, especially today. And you're absolutely right. He attacks rebounds. And boy, you love that as a coach when you just go and attack the rebound and secure it and then, lead us out on the break. And I thought that helped us score quite a bit too, getting some key rebounds and the outlet pass then is the next thing. We saw late where Indiana had a rebound. I think it was Justin Smith maybe or Trace. I think it was Justin Smith and the guy came from behind and stole it. Those are things that we can prevent as well.
Yep. Okay, coming up as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 11-point victory over Portland State, I will point out today's meaningful moment that you might have missed, and we will go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from this game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Coach Brian Tonsoni. We are breaking down Indiana's victory over Portland State on Saturday afternoon at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. Coach, it is time for the meaningful moment that you might have missed. And this, kind of goes back to something that you were talking about in the first segment, about really being able to attack in the half court. And I want to talk about Justin Smith because, defensively, I don't think this was a great game for him. I just, as we mentioned, I think he was one of those guys that just kind of came to play defense, didn't come to compete on defense. But boy, I thought offensively, he really came to play. And, look, the offensive rebounds were great. He had 5 offensive rebounds, but what continues to impress me the most about him is how he's really dribbling in the half court with purpose. We saw so many times last year where he would dribble himself into a bad shot or dribble himself into a turnover by making poor decisions and by just kind of being shaky with his ball handling. And that is not happening, very, very early in the game. So this is the meaningful moment. It was 5-4. There's really the possession's just going nowhere. And I thought Justin did a great job of just using his dribble to create a passing angle. He dribbled down toward the baseline, which has been a bugaboo for him, where he's gotten himself into trouble. But he stayed under control, made that one dribble, got himself a passing angle to Trace, and Trace ends up getting fouled. Now, he missed both, but he was, he was just really patient and showed really great vision. And I feel like last year he would have kind of rushed a tough shot or dribbled himself into a turnover. And we saw it a little bit later when he was on the baseline and dribbled right in for a dunk and, had another one from the top of the key, took it and just went right down the lane and dunked. And, it continues the trend, Coach, of him, whereas before you would cringe when he dribbles, now he really seems to be doing it with more purpose, more confidence. And if that's something that can continue when the competition gets better, boy, it's going to make him hard to handle for opposing defenses.
Yeah, exactly. I thought in the past when he drove, he was worried about getting blocked or worried about contact, and it was not worried about, I'm just going to jam the ball through the hoop. And you tell players like that, when you got an advantage, go to dunk it and dunk it hard, because that way if you get fouled, you have a chance of finishing the three-point play. But if you don't go with the purpose of making the shot, dunk or layup, and you go wondering about something else, and I just think that shows that he is – a little more focused. The word consistency will come up every post game until like game 11, until we believe that it is etched in him for the rest of the season. But, so far this season, he's going to the rim hard. And, I do think there were a couple times he got a little loose with his passing. He got a little pressure and he kind of just threw it away that I would like to see him cleaned up. Today, there's I thought Justin Smith was very, very solid today. And I really believe that if Justin Smith can play like this, and maybe it's just an above average game, then Indiana's going to be in a position to win, because he is such an athlete and such a talent and such a hard guard and getting out in transition and so forth. I just think he is a real key. I think we can win without him, but it's just nice to see him playing as hard as possible. And he had 8 rebounds today. And so only 2 turnovers, just an all-around good effort by Justin.
It was, but I think there were still some of those moments, and these may just be moments that you have to take from him, because his personality is one that at times on the court is going to be laid back, and there was one possession back when it was 58-51, so it was basically right before the banner moment that I talked about. He got stripped after getting a rebound on the other end, and it was a little 2-on-1, but he didn't even challenge the guy who was going to shoot it. And look, maybe he just didn't want to pick up a foul, but there's a little something there you would like to see. Hey, I just got stripped. I'm going to, go hard and go get this guy. And he just kind of stood there, and a couple possessions later, Walker, their big guy, just kind of drove into the lane and scored on him, and it's one of those, again, you don't want to foul, and Justin was kind of in position, but like at some point, you just got to wall up and not let the guy get by you, and when the other team is driving aggressively and being really assertive in there and being tough, you got to match that. And so, as you look for continued areas of growth for him, there continue to be some of those possessions throughout games where he doesn't make things uncomfortable for the opposition at times. And I agree with you. I think overall he played well today, but those moments kind of stuck out. And I think now as a junior where his example matters a lot more, those are some of the things that you would like to see out of his game. I also just don't know if that's
I also
him.
think I'm guilty of this as well, and I agree with you. I think because he's had 2 years where he's had a lot of those moments, we actually look for those moments and notice those moments more. I'm sure if we watched Phinisee with that same kind of mindset, we'll see some times where we thought Phinisee just kind of relaxed a little bit. When you play a game, we all know you'd love every player to never take a possession off, never take a second off. But within a game, there are places where you can rest and do certain things like that. And some guys do that. I did not feel that way about Justin. I was angry about the back tap just because it's a back tap. And it's also something you don't want to compound and make two mistakes. So you made a bad play. If you foul there now, there's still a lot of time left in the game. I didn't think that was bad. I do think I was more bothered with this too lackadaisical just tossing of the ball when he was falling back. When someone pressured him, he just kind of threw it and hoped that some of our guys got it. But I think I look at him a lot more critical than I do other players because of what's happened. The majority of time he played like that, I believe, the last 2 years. Right now it's a minimal amount, so I count that as a huge, huge improvement.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Another play that really jumped out at me, and I was kind of hoping that we were going to see more from him, but Deron Davis, about the 10.5 mark in the first half, really did a nice job defensively, moving his hands, moving his feet, poked the ball away from the defender, which, by the way, Deron Davis's hands, the quickness of his hands defensively, a very underrated skill. He's got quick hands, which helps to lead him to some steals. And, got on the floor, dove after that ball and ended up securing it, and it turned into a fast break going the other way. You saw Joey Brunk at the end of a game where it's already decided, diving on the floor. We've talked about the competitiveness of Trace Jackson Davis. I do like how our big guys will get down and mix it up. Like, we have some toughness. Those guys aren't going to get punked. I was just disappointed that we didn't get to see more from Deron. I mean, he was clearly engaged in the game, so I don't know if if there was an injury or some reason why he didn't play in the second half. It's obviously not a great matchup for him, but it's also Portland State. Like, you still would like to see him get in there and do something. So, hearkening back to what we talked about on Assembly Call Radio, I'm still not concerned. I just don't think there's much we're going to learn about him in November. But gosh, I'd like to see him play more than 4 minutes. So I hope there's some kind of explanation, although maybe I kind of don't, because if the explanation is some sort of nagging injury, I definitely don't want to hear that. So that was a great play, and I was disappointed we didn't get to see more from him.
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought after that I saw him kind of lift his leg and kind of shake something out. I don't know if that was a tweak and then it was preventative in the second half. And you guys mentioned on the radio show that, November is a time to play other people and then bring him along and keep him healthy. I kind of hope that's what it is. I've not been very high on Deron for what I think Archie wants to play. I do think Duran's a nice player. 15, but he's just right now he looks a little slow, whether that's conditioning or an injury. And I think that they're just going with other players right now, and hopefully that's to save him. And last year, I will say that I thought when he played and he was as healthy as he could be, I thought he really did a nice job. So that's the ceiling for Deron. And it's just now with a competitive team that he's competing for minutes as well. I don't think his minutes are guaranteed because he's a senior and he's Deron Davis. And when he's going to have to do it in practice and he's going to have to do it in a game. And it's kind of a nice problem to have if other people are beating a guy with the quality of Deron Davis out for minutes, then that's a good sign. But, we just don't know if that's the case or it's injury or they're just trying to be patient with him. We'll see.
Let's also remember, the offense has looked good these first couple games. You're playing sub 300 defenses, and some of the stuff that we're seeing in these first couple games is fool's gold. It's not stuff that's going to be there in the Big Ten. Like, we'll talk about the transition because the transition has looked really good. Some of those opportunities are going to dry up when you play against good transition defenses. Justin Smith was able to basically get to the lane anytime he wanted to. Better defenders are not going to let him do that. And to me, where Deron Davis, where he provided his biggest boost last year and where I still think he will this year is on the offensive end of the court. Last year, Indiana, again, was 0.1 points per possession better with him on the court because you can dump it down to him and he's efficient, but he's also a great passer out of the post. And so, I don't want us to get all excited with how well the offense is playing and forget that when you get into February and tough Big Ten games, having a senior with his skill and experience is going to be important. So, everybody should just stop before you write off, oh, maybe we don't need him, all this stuff. We are going to need him come later this season. He's going to be a very important piece. So, that's why I'm not overly concerned about what's happening in November. But, if he's only going to play 4 minutes every single game, I might get a little bit concerned. I'd like to see more from him. Let's talk about some numbers here, Coach. We probably should talk about the guy who led Indiana in scoring, Al Durham. So that's the first stat, 18 points. And, look, I have some issues with the way that Al played today. We'll get into those. But I will say, man, his aggressiveness and his vision in transition has been awesome. And it kind of feels like we have had more competently led break opportunities this season than we had all last year. This team was terrible on the break last year. And there's just a different get it and go confidence and quickness to the decision-making of Al when he's got the ball in the open court that I love. And, that's how he got a lot of his points. He was able to get to the line for 3 free throws. Defensively, again, I didn't think he was very good. But where I really take a positive from this is Al has been a guy that when he's kind of not been able to find his flow in a game, he really hasn't been able to find his flow to where he would score 0 or 2 points. He can't do that now because there isn't Juwan, there isn't Romeo. Like, he has to produce. And to his credit, even in a game where he struggled in a lot of areas, responsibility for production, that term Archie had, he stepped up with 18 points. So, I before we maybe talk about some of the stuff defensively that we didn't like from him, and I guess we covered it a little bit earlier, it is worth noting that he still stepped up and scored points, in a game where his team only won by 11. And I think a lot of it was just, he continues to push it, in those break opportunities. Indiana had 18 fast break points, and that was great to see because to me, it's probably been the single biggest area of growth that I've seen from him from one year to the next.
Yeah, I thought he struggled against pressure when he was guarded on the break, when he could get going and pitch the ball ahead and make a decision or get the ball and beat someone in the lane and shot fake and spin back and score. That's when he was best. I thought you see why he's probably the backup point guard in a set offense against heavy ball pressure because I thought he struggled. His one turnover where he didn't recognize there was someone from behind. And I thought he was poor on defense to start. But he must have got talked to at halftime because he was a lot more aggressive getting into that lane with the ball to make things happen. And, boy, did he have, I thought, a nice second half. And, again, this is coach speak on our show tonight because we're talking about a guy playing bad, having 18 points and only 1 turnover, and he's really being forced to play 32 minutes as the lead guard when Rob Phinisee is supposed to be playing that. And Al defensively, here's another thing to think about too. Al's probably guarding their point guard, and that takes a skill too. And he might be better guarding the 2 or the 3 for what he's been known to do, and leave Rob, who is really good at guarding the point guards of the world. So when Rob had 26 minutes tonight too. So there's a matchup at the guard thing as well. You have to be pleased with Al Durham because, again, I think all of the people looking at Indiana were rating us at the floor. And maybe that's just me with my, crimson-colored glasses on. Everyone else is guys who scored 3.7 points a game last year are going to rise up and score 15 and be great across the country, except for Indiana's guys. They're going to stay where they were last year. Boy, Al is showing them that he made a lot of improvement in the off season. And what a game I think is maybe average to slightly above average for him overall. And not even good, or not. He leads us in scoring. That's that's just great, and it puts me at ease.
It is, and that's the thing. He's a junior now. He's a captain, so more is expected of him. There's a reason why we're not really coming on here criticizing Armaan Franklin for kind of a rough game. Because he's a freshman, and you're going to allow for him to have some of those games, and that's what we saw from Al as a freshman and some as a sophomore, and he can't do it now. And to his credit, as you said, even though he had some struggles, still went out there and led this team in scoring. Still was able to push the ball in transition, do some of those things, and so it's one of those weird ones. It's like you're impressed because he didn't play quite as well, but still produced. But sometimes you have to do that, and so that was really nice to see. The other numbers that I want to point out. There's a term that we've used some of this offseason, which is shot volume. What is the path for Indiana to be good offensively when they're not going to be a prolific three-point shooting team in this era of three-point shooting? And when you don't have great isolation scores, especially when Devontae Green is off the court, well, you've got to get high-quality shots and you've got to get more of them. And one of the paths to doing that, credit to John Gassaway, who created this shot volume stat, is get offensive rebounds to create more opportunities and prevent turnovers to maintain your opportunities. Indiana, as you mentioned, only 10 turnovers. That is Archie Miller's stated goal for each game. And this is a Portland State team that forces turnovers. And you only have 3 guards in there. So that was really good. 16 offensive rebounds, really good. And Indiana got to the free throw line for 30 free throws. And Coach, made 22 of them. We shot 73% from the free throw line, Coach. 73%. Man, our free throw percentage is okay right now, which has got to make everybody happy. But, how does Indiana score 1.28 points per possession, a game where you go 3 of 14 from downtown? That's how you do it. And there are going to be games this year where we don't shoot well from 3-point range, and this is the path to how we still create efficient offense. Reduce turnovers, get offensive rebounds, pick your spots in transition, and get to the free throw line. So this, if you kind of want to look at a box score for how it might look, when Indiana wins in Big Ten play, but they don't shoot well, this is the path right here. And credit to the guys for taking care of the ball and being really aggressive on the offensive glass, because that's what was able to allow them to do that.
Yeah, and that's the rebounding on both ends was just fantastic. But offensive rebounding is a way to clean up maybe bad execution, bad decisions, tough shots at the end of the shot clock. Really impressive on the offensive glass, and people keeping the ball alive in their pursuit of the basketball. I think that's an excellent stat, along with those turnovers. And really what that does then, it prevents the other team from getting out and going as well. And so, you look at that as offensive numbers, but if you keep low turnovers against a team that press, they don't have easy opportunities at the other end. And thank goodness, because our half-court defense wasn't very good and gave up some threes and so forth. But if you turn it over 20 times, that's 10 more opportunities for them on the break with an advantage to score at the other end. So not only is the numbers that you mentioned, the rebounds and the low turnovers, there to get good quality shots and score, it's also helping on the other end. And I think that, really stands out in a game like today that ended up being a little closer than what we all wanted.
Yeah, and the other number to me that was that was important was the offensive rebounds for Portland State. Do you realize they were the number 1 team in the country last year in offensive rebounding percentage? I mean, it's a big thing that they do is they crash the glass, and Indiana held them to only 7 offensive rebounds. Now, that was important because they turned those 7 offensive rebounds into 12 points. And some of those were really important points. Like you think back to the first half, that sequence that I mentioned earlier where Jerome made the 3 and, Trace got the dunk and we're up by 10 and it felt like we might push it to a 14 or 15 point lead. We have that possession on defense where we come down, we force a missed shot, and they get 2 offensive rebounds and score. And I don't know if you saw Mike Roberts on the bench, but man, he was apoplectic when they got those rebounds. Because sometimes there's like those, and this comes back to the killer instinct. There's important moments in a game when the crowd's going, you've got a little momentum, you make a play, you go the other way, and you can really put your foot on the opponent's throat. And Indiana didn't do it. So even something that they did well throughout the game, in some key moments, it's like they let their foot off the gas. And this happened again in the second half. Rob played great D on Woods. This was during that stretch where he was defending Woods and forced a really tough step back. And Armaan Franklin just didn't block Hauser out at all. And Hauser was able to go up and get that nice little bucket, which kind of kept them around. That would have been a put your foot on their throat, great defensive play by our guard, let's get the rebound and go the other way. So overall, a good job on the defensive glass, but there were a few of those kind of timely moments where it's like, hey, let's go get this rebound, and we're really going to, end their hope, and Indiana didn't do it. So you'd like to see him be a little bit better there, but overall, given the context of how good this team is, getting offensive boards, I thought Indiana did a really good job, and that's a credit to Justin Smith, that's a credit to Trace Jackson-Davis, that's a credit to Race Thompson, who really did a nice job on the glass today, and Joey Brunk, too.
If you have a chance and you want to go back and look at it, if you're a listener, I really thought they attacked the glass, and it was team rebounding. I wrote that down, team rebounding. And one of those 7, maybe even two of those, I remember where there were 3 people and the ball just kind of eluded Indiana and fell into their hands. So you have some of that. But also the rebounding is the finish of a good defensive possession. It's not just guarding the ball. It's not just contesting the shot. It's not guarding off-ball screens. It is completing the defensive possession with a solid rebound. And the game of basketball is a game of runs. And what you want to do is you want your runs to be longer than the other team's runs. And an offensive rebound, giving up an offensive rebound and not securing the defensive rebound is a way to allow runs to continue or to keep teams in games. And it just seemed like today, only 7, but 3 or 4 of them were really at key moments in an overall really solid effort off defensive rebound today. But you got to do it at key moments as well, because I talk a lot about separation. When you get separation, you want to separate even more. You don't want that separation to accordion back and forth, and that's stopping those runs. And you do that with good rebounding and key timely rebound.
A couple other numbers. Indiana only 11 assists on their 30 made field goals. That's a number that you really want to see go up. And I think a lot of that came in the first half when Indiana didn't. What did we have in the first half? Let me look. We had 5 assists in the first half on 15 made field goals. And, it was the ball movement wasn't as crisp today. There was, kind of some more one-on-one stuff. So you'd like to see that assist number be up a little bit. But, Coach, what other numbers jumped out to you from this performance?
Well, we obviously need to just keep praising the free throw shooting. I will say this on the other side. Indiana fouled too much. And you got to know when you're in the bonus to play a little differently. Giving up 32 free throws to the opponent was another reason why this was an 11-point margin when it really was, 15 to 20, I think, by the way the game was played. And if we play as well as we can, I think it's over 20. But those free throws that they get, that's just that you cannot foul to the extent of 32 free throw attempts in any game, because that's going to keep any team, good or bad, at a high level of offensive efficiency. And credit goes to the officials as usual. They help with the free throw rate of the opponents. So just unbelievable sometimes. Watch second halves of basketball games. If it was a little touchy in the first half, then all of a sudden 48 fouls in the second half, or they didn't get enough time at the monitor. It's just a real, now we got flopping warnings and more Bo Borowski at the table. But the officials, I thought, did not have a good game today. So just not good. But you got to adjust. It comes down to the coach and the players making the adjustments. You can complain all you want. Can't foul. That stat just really sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, well said. All right, coming up on the assembly call, we are going to hand out our game balls and then hit any other lingering storylines from this game. And then we'll look ahead to Indiana's next opponent, and then it'll be time for last call. That's all next here on the assembly call. Stick with us.
This is Tim Priller, and I never miss an episode of the Assembly Call.
All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. And while you are there, make sure that you sign up for the free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 7,000 of your fellow IU fans have subscribed. You can text IU to 66866 to subscribe to the newsletter. That's IU to 66866. Or, again, go to assemblycall.com. I'm Jerod Morris here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Coach, before we hand out the game ballers real quick, I just checked the updated KenPom stats, which can always be a little bit noisy early in the season, of course. A lot of it is kind of built in from the preseason, some stuff from last year, and then, you get some of these crazy early results. But it is interesting early on, and I have to imagine Archie Miller is not going to be happy about this. Who would have thought that after 2 games, Indiana's offensive rating would be higher ranked than its defensive rating? The Hoosiers currently 33rd on offense, 45th defensively. So, if you want to know, just in terms of from an opponent-adjusted basis, how bad was this defensive performance, Indiana ended a 36th in the nation in both categories and dropped 9 spots by giving up, whatever it was, 1.1 points per possession to Portland State. So that's not good enough. So there's plenty of time to recover and all that stuff, and this is just one data point. But we're doing the postgame show for that one data point. So it's, we can harp on it a little bit. I really look forward to listening to what Archie has to say after the game, because I just don't think he's going to be happy with the defense. And that, is just a statistical illustration of how poor this defensive performance was overall.
Yeah, and, I look at KenPom every day and look at the opponents just because it's basketball season starting and it's numbers. I mean, that's what we do. Those numbers will start taking care of itself in mid-December when you have a lot of numbers, just like the bracketology stuff is really nonsense, and yet we'll be putting out a new bracket here in 2 weeks. You got to remember that. But, yeah, the defense needs to be shored up. I think on the postgame show in the season opener against Western Illinois, everyone was happy about the defense. We thought it was there and it was good, and Archie in his postgame didn't like it, and we got an example of what Archie didn't like, and he's going to keep harping on it and harping on it and harp on it.
In fairness, it was better in the Western Illinois game than today. Like, they played a lot better, Yeah,
and I will always go back, and people can get upset with me being too soft, but I think the 2 guards that played today really had great games. Now, whether that was just because of bad defense from Indiana or they elevated their game today, sometimes it's when do you play certain opponents as well. So
I'm just getting tired of these guards. I'm just getting tired of it seeming to happen so often at Assembly Hall, where these guards come in. That's why, I wrote on my notes, who's going to get ticked off and tell this guy you're playing in Assembly Hall? And Rob finally did it. It's great. Those guys had a good game, but step up and stop them.
I mean, how many banked shots against Indiana until it starts not happening? Like an end of the shot clock. We've had 2 games already with banked threes and a third one that went around, out, hit the backboard, and went back in. That's 9 points right there on your defensive efficiency. So those numbers are early. I mean, it is frustrating that it happens. But again, it's Indiana. Guys get up for Indiana. That's why I don't like to quote a certain coach, but it's Indiana. It's Assembly Hall. You get jacked up for playing at those games, and we've got to find a way to counter it. To your point, Indiana has to find a way to counter that energy that comes into our building and make it more of a home court advantage shooting wise than it has been. So I do agree.
Yeah, and I don't want to over harp on it, but Archie Miller has said over and over, this is a program that's going to hang its hat on defense. And if that's the case, you don't play defense like this. This was an unacceptable defensive performance for a team that has that as its identity.
Yeah, and today it was really the guards that I thought struggled. But I still think it's lineup construction. Our strength is at the post, and we're going to be playing bigger lineups. And I think you're going to struggle. It's been a big worry ever since the talk of going to a big lineup of how are you going to guard? And is everyone one spot off of where they are their best defender? I think that's something to watch as the season goes on. If that's small, I thought the run at the end of the first half, we had that small lineup in again. We had one post, and you had Justin and Jerome and 2 guards in, and it was close, and then bam, it went out. 2 games in a row. I really like that smaller lineup, but you're going to have a log jam at the 5 if that's the case.
You are. All right, Coach, let's hand out our game balls. I will give you the honors of going first.
I caught a lot of grief from my buddies about last week's not giving it to L, but I'm not going to let that sway me. They don't. The chat mob's my friends, but I'm not going to let them sway me. I'm going to shock people. Probably I'm going to go Race Thompson.
Wow.
For his toughness, 10 points, 9 rebounds, and this stat alone, 4 for 4 from the free throw line as a big guy. And here's why. I thought in the first half his rebounding and his toughness kind of set the tone when other people that you expect were struggling. I mean, Al Durham's going to lead us in scoring a lot or have a lot of points. But Thompson in 16 minutes to almost have a double-double, I just think that overall everyone else had some issues. And the other person I was considering was Trace Jackson Davis with a double-double, obviously would be the second consideration there. But I thought almost every other player had some issues. I thought he played as complete a game as he could for his 16 minutes.
Yeah, I'm giving mine to Trace. I thought he was the most consistent player on both ends of the court. You mentioned the double-double, 13 points, 10 rebounds, his first double-double in an IU uniform. Man, I 3 or 4 times a game watching him, I catch myself thinking, my God, is he going to be good? And he's already good, but he has a chance to be great. He really does, because he plays hard, he competes, he's skilled, he's athletic. He really tries to do the right things out there, and I think that's what you saw today. The big runs that Indiana had, he was involved in them. That big stretch that I talked about in the first half where they extended the lead, he was there making things happen. The run when Rob started playing the defense and they went on the little run in the second half to push it out to 70-57, he was there making things happen. And I feel like every single time through these first few appearances, and we've watched Indiana when good things have happened, either at the start of game or when they're making a run late in the first half, Trace is always out there. He's always one of the guys who's out there. And a lot of times it's a block shot or it's a tough rebound by him that helps spur it on. And I thought that's what we saw today. So I thought Allen and Justin did some good things offensively. They led Indiana in scoring, but I thought Trace Jackson Davis led Indiana overall in playing on both ends. And so he gets my game ball. That means we've got a tie. So for the official game ball chat mob, you guys need to weigh in between Race Thompson and Rob Phinisee, or Race Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis. And then Chad, if you can add them up and let me know, then that'll be the official game ball for today. So you can put those there in the chat mob. Coach, what else do we need to talk about from this game? We've kind of gone through all the individuals. Oh, Demezy Anderson didn't play. And I guess he's dealing with kind of a slight injury. Doesn't sound like it's anything serious, although everybody's probably, people probably roll their eyes now when we say it's probably not anything serious, because that's what we were told about Devontae and Rob, and they didn't practice for a month, and Devontae's still not playing. So who knows? He was injured. I don't think this was a particularly great matchup for him to be in there anyway, but I would have liked to see him get some experience in it. But that's why he didn't play, is just due to injury.
Yeah, That was noticeable. I think Davis's lack of minutes, we've talked about, that was noticeable. But let's talk about Jerome Hunter hitting his first 2 threes, and they looked nice. And again, so he's still getting in the groove of playing. There's a lot of things that he's struggling to do. But in 31 minutes, I think he had 16 minutes in game 1. He had 15 in this game. He scored 7 and 9. And that's probably at the lowest of his playing ability will be in these first 5, 6, 7 games as he gets acclimated to playing again. So he's averaging 8 points in playing less than half of a game. And I think there's some things, again, you see some things where he struggles, but you also see some reason why he was a 4-star and how he can help this team. I think we still need to be patient. He'll be up and down inside of games, and he'll be up and down there. But I was nice to see him, for his confidence, get a couple threes to go down.
And he and Race really complement each other well when they're on the court together, because he can obviously play inside, go inside and outside. He's an active player, and Race, obviously, with what he can do from a defensive standpoint and rebounding, those two guys have a chance to really give Indiana a strong bench as they get more up to speed, because they can make things happen, both on the glass and from a scoring perspective. They get in there and give you some quick points, because Jerome can fill it up like he did today, and Race can just go grab you 4 or 6 points because he's just out toughing the other team. And again, those are going to be guys, I think they project to be guys, they're going to be hard to keep off the court in the in crunch time. And that isn't that kind of what you would like as a coach, to have 7 or 8 good options that you trust in crunch time, and to have to make those hard decisions?
And here's why: because Smith has a chance of being more consistent with his play, because he's going to have to be consistent with his play, or Jerome's going to take some minutes, or, Trace Jackson Davis can't let up and think, okay, I got my first assembly call game ball as it's being voted on in the room.
We'll send you a plaque, Trace.
Start relaxing because Race is starting to play minutes. And I think you're seeing that with Brunk and Davis, and the competition raises all boats. And I don't know if that's the right saying. It's Saturday afternoon. But
sure.
I just think that's good.
A rising tide raises all boats.
Rising tide. Yeah, I'm watching the Alabama game on the big screen here, and didn't think of that. So, I do think this team will get better and will be better. I don't know that it's going to be able to beat the number one team in the country or anything, but it's fun to watch because, again, today was average or at least below average. And it's a double-digit win. And let's go. So, but yeah, I was happy for Jerome and Race to see those guys who haven't played last year because of injuries to start being very, very productive in their limited minutes.
By the way, just fun with noisy early season KenPom stats. Indiana currently 11th in average possession length at 13.5 seconds. All those transition possessions. Although I will say I thought our shot selection was pretty good for the most part, but I was disappointed. In the second half, when Woods started making all those threes, we started jacking threes early in the shot clock, which is uncharacteristic. Justin took one. Jerome took one. Maybe Al took one. I think Al actually made his. But it was just the sequence where it's like, this is not how we're going to play. We're not, when another team gets hot, we're not going to come back or stymie it because Jerome and Justin take early threes in the shot clock. I thought that was a point where the offense got a little tilted, and really needed to get some better shots there. So anyway, we don't need to go over any more KenPom stats because it's 2 games and they don't mean too much, but they are fun. I'm like you, man. I just go there and I just like to scroll and look. It's just fun to see how it develops.
Click on this conference, click on this opponent.
I know. It is. And by the way, Indiana overall 37th. So I think they entered today either 32nd or 33rd. So, not it was a win. It was a win. Not a good one. I think there's a lot for the, someone I was texting with someone during the game, disappointing, but I think Indiana, the coaches can get a lot out of this. And maybe that's the last thing that we'll talk about here real quick, Coach, before we go to last call. Like, how do you approach a game like this when you're in the film session, when you're with the team? Because it is a win, and there are some good things. But, I feel like coaches, to a certain extent, it's almost like you rub your palms together and you're like, oh, we've got so many things that we can go over.
Quick answer is 2 to 1 negative to positive. I mean, you don't want to browbeat people in game 2 when you got a game to turn around and play Tuesday. So you're likely to give them tomorrow off, I imagine, depending on the 20 hours and what you've been practicing. Tomorrow's probably an off day. You bring them in Monday, show the film, and run through your stuff for Tuesday night and get ready for the next opponent. But yeah, this one I would probably say harp a little more negative than positive because you want to keep that chip on their shoulder, and young people are so difficult sometimes. I believe good coaches have to be good at psychology to understand when to push, when not to push. But this is one where, I'd push a little bit to make sure I have their attention because you've had some good personal numbers, and you just don't want people to feel too comfortable. And it's way too early to feel comfortable. So I'd be getting on them quite a bit.
As we look
Coach
at
Roberts should get on him.
Coach Roberts is going to get on.
Yeah,
you guys are kindred spirits. You and Coach Roberts,
absolutely. I love Coach Roberts. I have a mad crush on Coach Roberts.
Okay, so as we look ahead, Indiana plays North Alabama on Tuesday. North Alabama currently ranked 285th in KenPom. They played South Carolina in their first game of the season. They won 77-50, or they lost 77-55. They're kind of the inverse of Portland State. Portland State, a team that for their level is actually pretty good offensively and not very good defensively. North Alabama flips that. They're really bad offensively, but they're actually decent defensively. So they may actually present a little bit more of a challenge defensively for Indiana, which will be nice to see. But this is only their second year in Division I. Last year they were 10-22, 284th overall. We're 184th in overall defensive efficiency, which for a team at that level is actually pretty good. So I think that shows that, they can do some things defensively. So I don't really know much more about their style. We don't have, Rain Man Andy Bottoms here to tell us everything about North Alabama. So that's about all we can say on them. But we'll have that post-game show for you Tuesday, and then we've got Assembly Call Radio on Thursday night coming up after that. So that's what we have coming up for you. Just a reminder, this is the Assembly Call IU post-game show. Because you are an Assembly Call listener, you get 20% off your entire order at homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code assembly20, assembly20. So if you want a great deal on the most comfortable and unique IU apparel that you'll find anywhere, go to homefieldapparel.com, use that promo code assembly20, and get 20% off your entire order. All right, Coach, time for last call. What final thoughts on this Indiana victory?
I'm hanging my hat on the fact that this Indiana team this year is a team, and again, will display that toughness. We wanted to compete at a little bit higher level than what they did today, but I think you still see the Archie Miller type of program starting to develop. Root like heck that it means a lot of wins, but it's just more of what I believe is Indiana basketball. You've seen it here early. Keep rooting for the Hoosiers to get better. Get Devontae some healing cream and get him back so we can get some scoring. But I really think this is more towards what Indiana fans want. It has to be done on the court. It has to be done in practice. You know, I'm not going to make excuses if they lose here in the next week or two. But it just has a feeling to me like this thing is starting to take advantage of what they need to be doing. So I'm pretty pleased, and I think that I can't wait for next Tuesday.
Hey, before we get to last call, one thing we never came back around on that I want to hit real quick regarding Rob Phinisee, who got the banner moment, and again, I thought his defense for that stretch was really good. You know, and you kind of take a quick glance, hey, 7 assists, Rob played pretty well. I don't think that really tells the story for what he did offensively. I actually think the 1 for 7 on field goals and the 3 turnovers are a little bit more indicative of a guy that really in the half court still seems out of sync. You know, outside of, I think, a couple possessions at the very end, every time he drove into the paint, bad things would happen. Either he threw up a shot against a good shot blocker that really had no chance, or, you know, he made a pass that really didn't have any chance. You know, so he look, I think we all hope that that's just a guy who's been injured, needs to get back in sync, but he's got to be a little better offensively in the half court for this team because, you know, he's been a guy that's been coming off the bench, and when he's coming off the bench, the half-court offense hasn't been quite as good. So that to me is something, you know, in terms of Rob, we never hit. He did, you know, make 5-6 of his free throws, you know, had a couple of steals. So I thought he was an important part of this team winning the game, but that's an area where as you project forward for what's it going to take for this team to be really good, as we think they can be, Rob's got to get better in the half-court.
Yeah, he's not back to where he was. It kind of reminds me of how he came back after his concussion last year. We needed him out there, but he wasn't really Rob Phinisee. That was in the first 14 games last year. I don't think the opening game or this game is really indicative of what he can do. You see flashes of it. You see flashes of the aggressiveness. You see the vision. He understands where things are going, but he's a little late in his decision-making. And so, yeah, that shows me a guy that's been out 4 weeks and really struggling.
Yep, I agree. So, look, the Hoosiers won by 11. It was not a very good defensive performance. Still some positives that you can take away, you know, in terms of the offensive production of Durham and Justin Smith on a day when some other things didn't go as well for them. Trace Jackson-Davis was, you know, I thought outstanding overall. Jerome Thompson really came off the bench, you know, gave Indiana some good minutes. But a lot to build on. And this is one of those games where I'm really looking forward to hearing what Archie Miller has to say in the postgame to kind of see what his thoughts on it were. And now I think, you know, again, you know, you have a schedule like this in November as a fan, you know, you really, you know, sometimes like, man, what are we, you know, are we just getting to December? You know, what are we watching for? Again, habits are so important. And if this is going to be a team, a program that hangs its hat on defense, it can't be one that has bad habits on defense. And I thought today there were some bad habits on defense. Credit to Rob Phinisee for stepping up and really competing and saying, enough's enough. When Woods really got himself going there in the second half, that was really huge. That was good to see. Hopefully that's something that they build on. But overall, the defense that we saw today, this is not anything close to the kind of defense Indiana's going to have to play to be, forget about being a top 20 defense, just to be a top 50 defense in the country. So I think we all expect it's going to get better. Getting Devontae back will help. So I'm certainly not overreacting. But as you look for what to watch for in these games, what are the habits? The free throw shooting, getting to the line, that habit's been good. The rebounding, that habit's been good. Low turnovers, that habit's been good. Some of the habits Indiana's creating have been good. We can build on those, feel good about those. But some of these other more questionable ones, especially the defense, that has to get better. And as you look in these next couple games against North Alabama and Troy, games Indiana should win easily, what kind of habits are they putting out there defensively? Because I'm sure that's what the coaches are going to be looking at, and I think those are going to be the most telling signs for where this Indiana team is as we get into mid-November, because then December's here, and there's no margin for error with those games, so Indiana's got to get some of that stuff cleaned up and get it cleaned up quickly. All right, that'll do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to longtime listener Bob Thompson, who produces a lot of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Monday for Banner Monday, and then Tuesday for the North Alabama postgame show. Until then,
take it from me, Nick Zeisloft. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And as always, go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.